We're above 50. We're 2 games above 50.
2 now.
And we may be breaking up the best bullpen in the world and start trading them. And you guys may be Haroldis Chapman, who averages 103.
Yeah, it's kind of scary.
He threw 105.7 last night. So that'd be fun if he came to the Giants.
Well, Casillas is worthless.
Yeah. Anyway, welcome to KSCO, and Raising the Standards is the aforementioned Mr. Fingerote with us in the studio, who we had on a couple of weeks ago. And because, Paul, how long have you lived in this area?
40 years.
So for some reason you thought from Monterey to Santa Cruz you could make it in 12 minutes.
No. I left lots of time. I just didn't know that there was going to be street closures and a little celebration going on.
Oh, that's right. It was the week of the street fair on Portola.
I always get a note from you guys about 12 minutes before I get here. By the way, don't go right. What are you talking about? And Rick goes, you're going to want to go a few exits first before you take it down. And no one knows why the street's closed. They're just...
we don't know.
It's like a big Pokemon deal.
I don't know.
Yeah. You don't know.
Yeah.
Melania, hang on a second. Melania, what do you think?
I don't know.
You don't know. I don't know. All right, let's... and so we had a chance to chat for a few moments a couple of weeks ago, and we're delighted to have you back in the studio. The book is called Jazz on My Mind. Tell me, I knew Herb Wong. First of all, give folks, the listeners, a little background on Herb.
Background on Herb Wong. Herb was a go-to guy in the jazz world for 7 decades of his life immersed in jazz. You'll love this. He really made his mark as a DJ on K-Jazz, the iconic San Francisco jazz radio station.
When Pat Henry owned it.
Yes. In fact, he won his first job by winning a contest at the station. He knew more about jazz than the DJs did on the fledgling K-Jazz. It was just a week after the station opened, and he was there for 36 years. He started Black Hawk Records, Palo Alto Records, a number of festivals, events, concerts.
Did a lot of work with the Stanford Music Festival.
Stanford and his area of Menlo Park, but he was an international jazz icon and really an innovator in jazz education, and that's where his love was and his heart was for many, many years. And he really did create the idea of jazz education, based it on science education, which he was a scientist, and that's how that came about.
He and I, along with an ex-partner of mine, started the Palo Alto Jazz Festival, and you think Los Gatos is tough. Palo Alto, we had Sarah Vaughan, we had Carmen McRae, Joe Williams, a really remarkable list of performers. And in Palo Alto, I don't care if Christ is doing the Sermon on the Mount. The sun goes down. We're out of here. Thank you. See you, Lord. I got to go. Got to run. We're out of white wine.
It makes sense. Just to me, it makes sense to have somebody who's so interested in jazz and so kind of taken by jazz, or jazz taken by them, that is a scientist, because jazz is so mathematical, and being able to keep that whole, because you see people, they have the rhythm section to kind of keep them where they're going, but it's like these people who can keep track of where they are in that piece is like...
Very astute observation, because I detect a lot of science in his writing. And also he said that there's so much in science and jazz that are similar. Basically, you're working off of a structure, but you're also working off improvisation. That's really the two elements at opposite sides are really what kind of brings science and jazz together. Same thing.
Well, and we'll talk more about his writings, but one of the things about Herb's writing for liner notes and columns was they were very accessible, and there are people who write jazz columns that it's like listening to Ornette Coleman on paper. It's just, you go, what the hell is this guy talking about?
No, it's true, and one of the finest, I think, comments that I've heard made about the book is that the information, and Herb was a genius, and he includes substantial information in the book, but it's a delightful read. It's a page turner. It is something that everybody, I think, would enjoy, mainly because I think Herb is such a writer, an enjoyable writer to read, but the book is filled with these stories of these jazz artists from behind the scenes. And again, 70 years in the business, he knew he was like the Zelig of jazz. He was behind the scenes at so many concerts, so many events, and so many recording sessions, and he has these personal stories about these artists. And I sat down with him when we started the book, and I asked him about all the artists, about all the stories. The book, by the way, is divided by instruments. We didn't want to do chapters because it just didn't seem right for a jazz book. So every instrument, Herb introduces the instrument, and then he has selected the best representatives for those instruments in the book, so that you're getting a flavor of some of the legends and some of the legends to be. So that's a large part of it.
You're listening to Raising the Standards, radio's finest hour.
Anywhere.
In the studio with us, Paul Fingerote, who's written a book called Jazz My Mind. We're going to talk a little bit more to him. Before that, Rick, do we have the Wharf to Wharf coming up?
Yeah, tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning.
8 o'clock, right here, live.
Now, I'm not going to do the bit because you have a very funny bit about what that event does.
Well, it's when the Kenyans come to town.
Right.
And they kick all of our butts.
Yeah.
They're running downhill. They're not running on dirt. They train, in another continent, super high elevation. So this is really easy. So I figured we can get Jacoby to dress up like a lion and run mid-pack.
I think that's great.
They're fast.
Or one of your dogs.
They killed your father, by the way.
No.
And so it's all these white guys chasing. Well, how strange is this? That's strange at all. With us in the studio, as we mentioned, Paul Fingerote. Paul, you were with Monterey Jazz Festival for years.
Yes, indeed. 30-plus years as their marketing director, public relations director.
What year did you start?
1981.
81. And your first, did we talk about this, your first Monterey Jazz Festival was when?
Probably a few years before.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you referenced Herb having started Black Hawk Records. Black Hawk has the album of the very first Monterey Jazz Festival from 1958, where Billie Holiday was there. Mort Saul was the MC.
Indeed, and there's a wonderful story from Herb about Billie Holiday's appearance at that jazz festival.
Well, rather than a bait and switch, why don't you share it with us?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the one story that I think you're going to want to read in the book because it's poignant, and I think the way Herb writes it is the way you want to read it. He has so many stories about so many artists. This one, some of them are very funny, some of them are tragic, some of them are poignant. This one was very poignant because, as you know, she passed away, I think, a few months after that, 5 months after that,
yeah.
And she had to be held up by her backup musicians, and that was a real poignant part of the book.
A tortured soul, indeed.
Yeah.
I think Harry James was at that, and his band was at the first one as well.
I believe so, but let me go back a little bit. There's another story in the book about Billie Holiday. Herb Wong, when he was 12 years old, was taking the train from Stockton up to the Bay Area with his parents' permission to go see jazz at 12 years old. He would hang out outside the clubs, and he got to know the music, he got to know the artists, and one day he saw that Billie Holiday was going to play with Lester Young at Hamburger Gus's in Oakland, and he went to see that show, and Lester Young came out after the first set, spotted him, and he'd seen him before at all these other shows, 12 years old, little kid hanging outside, so he brought him into the club and put him down next to the stage so he could listen to the music. That was the first time he saw Billie Holiday.
Ace Hill, whom you knew.
Ace Hill Trio, yes.
Ace Hill was, when he was a little kid, lived in Harlem, would hang out behind the Apollo. And one day he was cutting school, and he says, this old lady came out and yelled at me, and it was Billie Holiday. And I'm convinced that that people in those situations, Rick, it's like, what made you a good hitter? Oh, nothing. I live next door to Mickey Mantle, by the way. There are always things like that, the crossover deals that are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about, so you were the advertising manager, the marketing director. Marketing director
of the Monterey Jazz Festival. I met Herb at the festival. Herb attended every festival from 1958 through the last one he could physically attend, which is 2013.
He used to come to Jazz on the Plaza a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice man. Tell me, you started at Monterey. Had Tim already gotten there?
No, I worked with Jimmy Lyons.
Okay.
I worked with Jimmy before.
Let's take just a second to talk about that. Jimmy Lyons, was he a writer?
Jimmy Lyons was a DJ. You'd appreciate this. Yeah, he was on the radio. He was on Armed Forces Network, and he played all the upcoming jazz artists on his show. And then when he came around to thinking about having an outdoor jazz festival in the West Coast, or on the West Coast, like Newport started a few years before, and Monterey became the spot, he called in all those markers and brought in all the artists who he had been promoting over the radio since. So.
And it was one of those things really not unlike the Crosby and the AT&T that originally some downtown business guys, there was a way of bringing business to the community as well.
Correct. This was something Dave Brubeck played in front of the city council to convince them the jazz was okay. Yeah. That is not in the book, but Dave Brubeck is in the book. There's a number of conversations in the book that I want to point out because the book is filled with liner notes. There are 45 liner notes. There are 8 articles and 8 conversations. These are one-on-one conversations Herb Wong had with major legendary artists. He'd have these conversations in their hotel rooms, maybe in the green room, maybe backstage. And these were conversations that Herb directed towards creativity. What made you creative? How did creativity play into your life? And the book is filled with these conversations that have never before been published, never before been heard, except for Dave Brubeck, who had 2 conversations with Herb at Monterey. Many of these are sitting there in little cassettes in Herb's office, and so now people will get to read them in this book. And by the way, I would be remiss in my duties as a marketing person if I did not mention that the book is on sale now.
Well,
That's a good idea.
You can purchase it through my website, fingerote.com, or it's on all the usual suspects online, from Amazon to Walmart.
Okay. Or if you write, for instance, if you're in the middle of writing a note complaining about something we said on the show, we could also get your website. You can buy a book while you're waiting to hear back from
Kindle version.
While you're waiting to hear back from management going, he said what?
You never know.
We don't know anything about that. That's
No,
crazy.
don't give them ideas.
Like us at facebook.com/RTSJazz.